Good morning, friends. Jill here. Welcome back to the farm. I am happy to report that it is way cooler today than it was yesterday. I'm kind of back here in the shaded part of the raised bed garden, and so it feels nice. We got a breeze going on. I'm in here weeding my bed because I'm going to plant today. So I already planted this bed, gosh, probably a couple weeks ago with some beets. It was kind of old seed that I had, and the germination rate is extremely poor. So what I'm going to do is just replant it, but not with beets. So I do have a couple beets that came up, and I'm going to leave those. But I'm actually going to be planting radish today. And so I'm going to plant a couple different varieties of radish. I've got the daikon radish, which are those bigger radish. I bought these seeds from just our farmer's co-op. So there's a few different variations of the daikon. I believe these are those big purple ones that I grew that I absolutely love. They're like a Korean radish. They work really great in like kimchis and to ferment. The days to maturity on these are a bit longer than your, regular just ball radish. Those are like, gosh, 25, 30 days. You can direct seed them and then be harvesting them. These, since they're so much bigger, it takes about 60 days. And so I'm going to probably do this bed in about half. I'm going to do half of the daikon, and then I'll do the other two with the smaller ones because I do want to go ahead and start eating radishes. That's one of those things we can just continue to direct seed. So right now I'm just going to go through. This is my Cobra hand weeder. I'm not going to lie, I don't use this thing often, but when I do, I'm always reminded why I have it because it's pretty handy. So I'm going to weed the bed and then we'll get back to it. Tell you guys some tricks that I do, and I have a lot of great success. So we do root crops here. I don't know that I would say in a large way, but we grow a good amount every spring and every fall and winter. And there are a few things I do. I've heard a lot of things, right? I've heard people putting burlap sacks down and sowing their carrots into, using a board until germination. All of these are great options. However, I know I'm really busy here on the farm and raising a family and running a business that if I leave that board on here, I'm never going to remember to come and remove that off. You know what I mean? So I just try to set myself up for success in the beginning. And so what I'll do is I'll weed my bed really well. I will let the irrigation run on here for about a week, and I'll let all those grass seeds sprout and germinate, and then I come and weed them again. That way when I am planting my root vegetables and I start irrigating regularly, all that grass seed isn't sprouting. I'm not having to worry about that interfering with the growth of my plants or germination or anything like that. I've already handled all of that situation, and then it's just really feeding energy into the seed specifically. So that's something I do always encourage. Make sure you get a good handle on your grass and your weeds before you start planting root vegetables, because I notice that that sort of thing kind of, interferes with those a bit more than other ones. Also, overseed. If you've ever bought a carrot or anything like that, there are just these small little seeds. Same with lettuces. So I'm just going through and I'm making a line. We are using drip irrigation in our beds. We've got 4 lines ran, and so I'm going to create these lines. I'm going to let this irrigation kind of be my spacer for me. So I'm going to go down beside the irrigation. I'm going to take my hori and I'm going to draw a little bitty trench. And then I'm going to plant where I know, these emitters are just like soaking them in. And so instead of doing one ever so often, this is what I do with my beets, this is what I do with my carrots, I'm going to make that trench, and then I'm just going to go in and start pouring these pretty heavily. And I can go in and I can thin out. And I don't mind doing that because we do eat radish as a microgreen. And so not all of them are going to germinate either. So I would rather oversow and then come back through and thin than have to think about coming back out here and like reseeding and stuff every week or so. So I got the weeds taken care of, creating a straight line, Now let's go through and dig our trench. So now what I did is I just went through, lightly covered it with some soil. Now the great thing about these bigger daikon style radishes is that they do take 60 days. And you may think, well, why would you grow that? You have to wait so much longer. I do, but what I can do is in between where I planted these, I can go in and those smaller globe-like radishes that only take, you know, a month to germinate and produce, I can sow those down in between and have those harvested before I ever have to worry about these daikon radishes getting big enough to harvest. So I can really kind of max out this space that I'm using, which is something I just encourage. If you're limited on space, think of those things that you can interplant. I find that it's super, super helpful. Out in our high tunnel, I'm growing celery, but then I'm interplanting with baby greens and spinach because that celery is gonna grow really tall and provide some nice shade, and then my spinaches and my lettuce varieties, they can withstand you know, being shaded out a bit, and then they don't ever grow tall, they just kind of grow bushy. So I'm working with the plants that I'm growing. I'm making sure I'm growing things that I can interplant with other crops. And another key component to successful root crops, I'm actually going to teach at Charlie's school today. I am a gardening teacher there, and I'm going to teach the kids a couple times a month, and we get to start a garden together. And it's really fun when I think back to the basics, right? I think about how I would teach a child, and it makes me remember my own journey in gardening. And we all know there's 3 things, right, that make a plant grow. Sunlight, water, and soil. Those are the 3 crucial components to have success. Sure, there are tips and tricks, and I am all for telling you guys what those are, but those are the 3 fundamentals. You have to have sunlight to have the whole photosynthesis thing take place. You have to have water because that's, you know, allowing the plant to grow and thrive. And you have to have good soil conditions because that is where your plant's going to establish roots, or in this case, it is actually establishing the plant. And so I would tell you that if you're not having success in something, go back to the basics. Do you have the sunlight that that plant needs to produce nutrients? Do you have adequate water for that plant? Now, some plants require more, some require less. And do you have good optimal soil that is going to give these plants an opportunity to really thrive? I like to think of it too, like me, I'm feeding myself good quality food, which is going to allow me to thrive. I'm giving myself access to sunlight, which is giving me all those extra vitamins. I'm getting adequate water, which is just replenishing my body with what it's been depleted of. And then I've got myself a healthy little Jill. And so if I can create that for my plants, I usually always have success. Now, there are pests you're going to deal with. There's germination issues, which is what you saw here. So there are some other things where you can troubleshoot, but I would make sure before maybe you deep dive into what am I doing wrong, think back to those basics, those 3 fundamentals, make sure that those are right, and then you can kind of pivot off of that and really nail down your problem. For me, the pest. That really doesn't have to do with the amount of sunlight my plants are getting, or if it's adequate water, or even the soil that it's in. It's that plant in particular attracts those types of pests, and that's just another element that I'm going to have to worry about. But I do think that kind of those fundamentals is helpful in these types of situations. But I'm going to finish planting out here before the sun starts to peek over the pergola. Thank you guys for hanging out with me. I hope you guys have a wonderful weekend. We're actually going to be headed to the orchard this weekend, so stay tuned next week. We'll have some fun content about what we gathered when we were there and what exactly we made with it in the kitchen. But thanks for hanging out with me. I'll talk to you soon.